I did. I fucking hated it. Can I stay on the
Why?
show?
Oh, gods, yes.
Okay, good.
Welcome back, everybody, to World 1-1. I am your host, Larry the Nordic Beast Giver. With me, as always, is the Chocolate Nestle Wonder Ball with Thunder from Down Under, Eddie V. And also joining us this week, special guest, legend of the video game industry, Guinness record holder for having worked on more games than anyone else ever, Tommy Tallarico, creator of the Video Games Live concert series.
Woohoo! Boy, I got a lot to live up to now.
Yes.
All the hype, get hype.
I better be good.
Well, if you're anywhere as good as you are in person at your shows, there's no doubt.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Coming.
I'm glad we finally managed to make shit connect since January.
Yeah. Exactly, right? Welcome to my life.
I can't say I'm surprised, as perpetually busy as you are with as many plates as you keep spinning. It's impressive.
Yeah, thanks.
So
Yeah, I was looking you up because Advent Rising, me and Larry like constantly talk about, and then it was just like you worked on about I think 250 games.
300, over 320.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a
And so
lot.
you guys actually played Advent Rising.
I had Advent day and date. I was just, if nothing else, on the premise that Orson Scott Card was involved, because I grew up with a lot of his books.
Yeah.
So.
Did you? Yeah. I mean, I could tell you Advent Rising stories till the next 3 hours. I mean, it was so amazing, working on that project. I'll tell you a quick story in regards to the music. So the guys had me out. They flew me out to their office in Utah, and they were explaining to me this story, this concept. Donald Mustard, who was the guy who was really kind of, I think, the main brains behind the game design and the creation of the story and the dialogue and stuff. And they were explaining this game and they were explaining this character, and they're like, look, there's this guy Gideon, and he's like, kind of the hot shot. He's a little immature. His brother's like the captain of the spaceship, and he has a fiance on board, and like in the ship, and the freaking Earth blows up, and then there's a point in the game where you have to decide, do you want to save your fiance or do you save your brother? And depending on which one you pick, it's gonna do the whole game, and then like you have this like major responsibility of like growing up and taking control, and then you find out like you're this god and blah blah, and they're explaining this whole game to me, and they explained this thing, and then they said, but we don't really have an idea of what the music's going to be. We know we want it like epic and orchestral and emotional, but I guess it happens in space, so maybe we're thinking like something like Star Wars, which is what everybody always says when they do a space. We want it to sound like Star Wars. But I turned to him and I said, man, I got to tell you guys, like that story you just said was beautiful, and it was an emotional, and really it's kind of like a tragedy, because I mean the big spoiler about Advent Rising, and for those of you who haven't played it, mute the podcast right now.
You're 10 years late. You have no claim to spoilers complaints.
Exactly, right? So literally 10 years. So what happens is if you whoever you pick to save at the beginning of the game, they end up really dying at the end, and the person who you let die actually ends up being alive. So it's a total like mind fuck throughout the whole, throughout the whole game. So I explained this thing to her. I said, guys, this is like a tragedy. This whole thing. This is forget like normal like John Williams. Hey, let's rip off whole planets and Mars and stuff like that. This is an opera. This is like a tragic Italian opera. Let me write this like an opera. And they were like, whoa, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly, and so I started to write a couple of pieces and send them to them, and they were actually, like the very first piece, the opening piece of the whole game, when you're, where it's kind of going through the credits and you're docking your ship into the thing, that whole piece was written, I wrote the music first, and then they did that whole cinematic and did that whole credits. They timed it all to that music. So the music had such a major impact on the guys making the game, and they loved it so much. They loved what we were doing, is that we would come up with things and then they would create situations around and time out their storyline to parts of the music. So I was very, very fortunate that those guys really loved working with me and kind of just gave me the reins and said, Tommy, you're the composer, do what you want. And those are always the best kind of projects to work on, because, sometimes you work on an EA game, and I don't mean to bag on EA because I love EA, but a lot of times when you work on these big games, I can remember working on one of the James Bond games, and there were like executive producer, then there was the producer, then there was the line producer, then there's the associate producer, then there's the junior producer, and then there's the game design lead, and then there's the junior game design, and every single person wants to give you notes on what the music should be, and you're trying to please 20 different people. And what happens is when you kind of lose yourself to all these notes, and then it changes something because you're trying to please everybody, and then you end up pleasing nobody, and then you end up just writing it like the way I originally wrote it. So sometimes when you get onto these big projects, you kind of lose yourself a little bit. And I'm always one, it's probably because of my East Coast Italian attitude, but I was always one who would put my foot down and I'd start fighting with these people. I mean, respectfully, have a respectful disagreement with some folks, because I love input. Don't get me wrong. I love,
But you want to defend that creative vision that you have.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example, just so you don't think I'm some egotistical composer douchebag, because it's not about that. I'll give you the extreme. I would be working on a fishing game, let's say, and the producer, a lot of times they would want the music in the game to be whatever they were listening to that week, whatever thing they had in their CD player. So I'd be working on a fishing game, and the producer would be like, oh yeah, this is 15 years ago, and the producer would be like, I really want it to sound like Nine Inch Nails, and or yeah, have you seen Jay-Z's new shit? We should get some Jay-Z beats in there. And I'm like,
wait, what?
Yeah, oh, you have no idea. Dude, it's a fucking fishing game. What do you want? 9 Inch Nails? So I said, look, let me do some slide blues guitar, Southern.
Yes.
Fucking, you want to be hanging out. That is the menu screen to a fishing game, right? Not 9 Inch Nails. So those are the types of, discussions, respectful discussions, I'll call them that you'd sometimes, get into. I can remember the very first time that I did, so one of the very first games that ever used live instruments was a game I worked on called The Terminator on the Sega CD. This is back in 1993.
Yes. Was it the arcade game almost? It was a first-person shooter, was it?
No, it was a side-scrolling platform.
Okay.
And so we did it for the Sega CD, and it was the very first time anyone had ever used a live guitar in a video game score. I was the first guy to do that, and we also used 3D audio and the whole thing. So keep in mind, up until this point, everybody knew video game music as a bunch of bleeps and bloops. And
Yes.
some stuff had just started to come out, like Streets of Rage on the Genesis was epic. ActRaiser on the Super Nintendo was starting to use like kind of like orchestral samples and stuff, but nobody had really used like true live instruments. So I'm doing the music for Terminator Sega CD, and I'm rocking the shit out, right? So live guitars, bass, drums. I'm recording everything myself. I played every instrument on the album pretty much because we didn't have a budget to hire people, right? So I did everything in my studio, and when people heard it for the first time, some of the people who were working on the project, they hated it because they're like, look, this is like real rock and roll music. This is like real music, and it doesn't match the visuals. Like this doesn't, like the visuals are like 8-bit, well, 16-bit. It was like 16-bit sprites on screen, and what's this like real music? It sucks. I don't get it. It doesn't fit. You know, and again, my whole career has always been I wanted to always push the industry forward. I didn't want people to think of video game music as a bunch of bleeps and bloops.
Right,
because I wanted them to think of like real music, legitimate music. This is the same reason I created Video Games Live. I wanted to, help. I wanted the world to respect video game music, all video game music from all eras, but I didn't want them to think that it's just a bunch of annoying bleeps and bloops. That's the reason I created the show. I wanted to prove to the world how culturally significant and artistic video games have become as a whole. Not only video game music, but video games as a whole. The storylines that, things like Metal Gear Solid and the storytelling of like Halo and Shadow of the Colossus and, Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. These are like, Eco. I fucking cried during Eco when that motherfucker fell off the bridge. I'm in tears. I'm a 40-year-old man crying over a video game, right? That's the kind of effect that games like Zelda, games like Metal Gear, games like having on people, and the music should be just as emotional, just as touching, just as epic as those characters and those storylines deserve.
Right, and it's funny that you mentioned Sega CD because that was a CD format. So, like, if you think about it, you at the time, I feel like you're like being an innovator with the CD format. I'm like, you're getting a better sound than tape, and better than
people didn't recognize it. It didn't sit well with people though because they were so used to hearing like Sonic the Hedgehog, and again, great music, but the production wasn't live music. It was just the Yamaha chip that was on the Sega Genesis. So when they heard real guitars and real drums and real bass, some of the people were like, "Oh my God, this is horrible! It doesn't match." So I literally, and I would fight with the one of the guys on the project all the time, and we had to take it all the way to the president of the company, and the president of the company, he was funny, a great guy, but he wasn't like a hardcore gamer. He was like a businessman, and but a great leader. And so he said, "Okay," whole argument about. I said, "Look." I said, this music, no one's ever heard music like this before in a video game. And he goes, "Look, let me just hear the music. Play me the music." And so he played him the music. And he's like, after like 30 seconds, he's like, "This is amazing. This is great. We're keeping this." And that was the end of the discussion. And then, of course, the game came out and the music wins a whole shit ton of awards. And, all of a sudden, video game music, a lot of people are now recording live music for a video game, which is a great thing. So, but when people first heard it, it was kind of jarring, and I can understand it. I mean, I understood where they were coming from. I agreed with them that it wasn't something that was like, like the norm, but why do normal stuff,
I think because
I can almost understand that aspect.
Oh, go ahead, Larry.
Just in the thought that, that live music compared to that 16-bit visual almost creates a disparity, but in order to push things forward, one foot has to go forward and drag the other along with it in order for anybody to move forward.
Well, and each composer is different too, because a lot of times, like I see this a lot of times in games these days, where people don't want the music to be in the foreground. They want to, some composers will tell you that the best music written for media, movie, TV, video games, that the best music is the ones you don't even notice. That's just like they're, kind of bringing the emotion and bringing the storyline around, but you don't even notice it. Now, I respect that point of view, but I, as a composer, completely disagree with that view. For me, everyone's different, right? Each composer is different. I'm the exact opposite of that. In fact, so much so that my mindset was, and this is probably because I came from an era where video game music wasn't respected in the beginning. But for me, my goal in creating video game music was I wanted to be able to create music that people would want to listen to even after they turned the video game off. I wanted it to be so upfront and in your face that it took over the game. Now, a lot of people would disagree with that, and that's fine. I get it. I respect that. But for me, you play a game like Earthworm Jim, for example, and I wanted every song to be like not the feature, but I wanted every song to be like out front and in your face, and I didn't want it to be in the background. I wanted it to be funny. I wanted it to be dynamic. I wanted it to be, so that's how I approached the video game. Is I would write a song. I would come up with an idea and then say, you know what, I'm going to write a song, and hopefully even after people shut the game off, they're going to want to keep listening to this music, because at the end of the day, what's the thing that you remember most about your favorite video game music? Whether it's Zelda or Tetris or Castlevania or Metroid or Mega Man or Street Fighter or Halo or Kingdom Hearts or Metal Gear Solid or Skyrim, they all have one thing in common, which is they all have amazing melodies, right? Mm-hmm. It's the reason why 250 years later, we still hum Beethoven. Da 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 da, or da 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 da. We can still hum that shit because it's the reason we love the Star Wars music, because we can hum it. Jurassic Park, E.T., all the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Dun 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 dun. You don't remember the music to Avatar? Go ahead, hum me the music to Avatar. One of the biggest selling movies ever of all time. But you can't hum me the music to any Marvel movie. Hum me the music to Thor. Go ahead. Iron Man. Go ahead. Hulk. Go ahead. I'm waiting. Avengers. Right? So, yeah. And again, I'm not putting down other composers. I'm not putting down producers. I'm just saying that for me personally, I've always felt my approach has always been, I want to take that John Williams approach of here's a great melodic tune that's in your face. And I can do even more. I can even get away with more things than John Williams can because it's video games. In movies, 80% of the film is dialogue because you're telling a story. That's what a film is, telling a story through dialogue. In video games, it's the action that is the main thing. It's the interactivity. It's the quest. Mm-hmm. That it's like we get the action scene to the movie. It's like we get the action scene every level. So I'm always want to be in your face. I always want to be, and again, there's certain times where things can be subtle. Advent Rising is a perfect example. But even within that subtlety and those low dynamics, I can still create amazing melodies. It doesn't have to be invisible. And again, that's just my approach. And 90% of the composers out there might respectfully disagree with me. And I get it. That's okay. But for me personally, that's my approach.
The thing about it is that growing up in the 80s, like myself, it was chip tunes because, and if we could go talk about how popular Mario is memorable, how Mega Man 1 and 2 and 3, how those chip tunes arrangements. And then when you get to the 16-bit, like you mentioned ActRaiser, it has an orchestra score that as gamers, we definitely as kids, we don't recognize. Yeah, we're thinking about the action and what cool things that we could do in the game, but we don't think about like music and stuff. like, to me, Streets of Rage 2 and Secret of Mana and the 16-bit is some of the strongest and still to this very day best like soundtracks of all time for me personally. Because
now I'll tell you, I'll give you the secret too. See, the reason why old school video games, and you talk about chip tunes and the old school music, the reason they were great, whether you talk about Mario, Tetris, Sonic, whatever, is because back then we only had 4 voices or 6 voices.
Yes.
To work. And when I say voices, I mean like channels or tracks, like monophonic voices. So if you wanted to do a chord, a triad, which is a chord, 3 notes all played together, guess what? Half your memory was now used up just to play one chord, right? So because we were limited back then, you better bring the melody. That's all you had. And by the way, we only had about 40 or 50 seconds or a minute, and then it had to loop because, again, we didn't have the space. You go back and play the original Sonic the Hedgehog, those songs are 45 seconds to 50 seconds long. They're not like 3-minute epic melody. They're all incredible melodies. Every one of them in the original Sonic, every level was amazing, but they're 45 to 50 seconds. And so strong melodies, and you better get it out quick. Now, so what I do is when I still write music to this day, I always took that old chip tune approach. I always put myself in that old 8-bit or NES, which I wrote music for the NES and the Game Boy, and those are the most limited systems. I would always put my mind there and start with that mindset of, I need a great, strong melody. Then I can put all the shit over it. I can put all the live orchestra and the choir and the percussion. That'll all come later. But once you have a strong, amazing melody, and Mario and Zelda is a perfect example, that same melody we've been hearing for almost 30 years, right?
And I think that's why Shovel Knight gets that respect with this music. Bring it because like that chiptune style, modern gamers don't understand and don't respect. You have to kind of do your history of some retro style games and why that music is important and why it's so memorable to a lot of us gamers. And that's why for us as older adults and stuff, when we play Shovel Knight and we hear the music, we be like, okay, this is taking me back, and they nailed it.
Right. Well, it's like if you've seen on Netflix, like that's a perfect example where the music and the style of that movie, like it takes us back to the 80s. Even the music and the synths and the stuff that they use takes us back to that time, and it gets us like, and it brings us to a time we remember when we were kids and remember that feeling of playing Zelda for the first time. I mean, I got to tell you, from doing video games live now for over 15 years and hundreds and hundreds of performances all over the world, I still get 30, 40-year-old men, big, tough guys that look like Larry, and I'll get these big guys come up to me and they're in tears after the show at the meet and greet, crying, saying, when you guys busted into Zelda, I became a hot mess. I just started crying because it reminded me playing that game with my dad for the very first time in 1986 or whenever it was. And it brought me right back to my childhood. And my dad's now passed away. And boy, that just meant the most thing to me. It's the most emotional I've ever been at a live show ever. That's the power of video game music. And Larry, you probably heard me say this at the show, is because I say this on stage every night. I say, one of the reasons, because people always ask me, wherever I travel all over the world and I do all these interviews, people ask me, what makes video game music so special? What is it? And the answer, I think, is pretty simple. One, like I mentioned, it brings us back to this childhood, brings us back to these emotional times where we didn't have bills and pressures of being an adult and all that stuff, right? But
it connects you to a moment.
Right. It connects you to a moment in your life. But the other reason is that when you play a video game, you become that character. And
Yes.
this is what separates video game music from any other music ever in the history of the universe, is that when you become that character, that music becomes a part of your life because you're that character. That music, those themes are your themes. Talking about Indiana Jones earlier, right? When you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Indiana Jones is on screen and it goes dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
That's Indiana Jones's theme. When you watch Star Wars and Darth Vader walks through the door, dun 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 dun, that's Darth Vader's theme, right? But when you're fighting 100 people trying to save your village and that music is going off, or when you open that chest and that chest opens and that little melody plays, that is your music. It's your music, and you start humming that shit all day. You'll open your refrigerator door and you start humming that treasure chest open shit, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, you start to incorporate these themes in your real life, in your mind. And that's no other music in the history of the universe has ever had that kind of effect on people ever. Period. End of story.
It's the soundtrack of your life. Like that connection, because like Sonic 2, I think it's Sky Chase Zone. Like if I'm taking a walk or it's a nice breeze, that song always comes to my mind, and I always start humming it like do 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 do, because it matches. I'm like, this is part of my life. Like it kind of represents of, you know, when I'm stressful or anything like that and I need something to take the stress, that song comes to mind and it just makes me feel relaxed. That's part of the soundtrack of my life. So I understand. Totally. I understand where you're coming from. Oh, this is so good. I love talking video game music. Oh. Well,
so you mentioned Sonic 2, one of my go-tos that I will always pop in my head to hum when there's nothing going on is Forever Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic 2.
Yes!
It's now one of the catchiest little fucking tunes, which, Tommy, if you've not seen this, you'd probably appreciate this. There's a guy on YouTube, has a username, Smooth McGrooves, does nothing but like
I know Smooth.
Music.
Yes. A cappella. He does.
Yes.
I told him, I said, look, whenever we're in your neck of the woods, I want him to come on live. And because we've had so many people like be a part of Video Games Live. A lot of people don't know this. Lindsay Sterling. Everyone knows Lindsay Sterling.
Yes.
She used to play with Video Games Live. Peter Hollins. He's a lot like Smooth McGroove. Peter Hollins has sang with us. Maluka has sang with us. I mean, I love that whole culture, and we try to, we want to help promote any like video game bands have played with us on stage in the past. So any people like that, we always love to give a voice to and have them be in our show. So I'm waiting. Smooth hasn't played with us yet, but we're getting. Brental Floss, if you know him, he's performed with us. But Smooth hasn't performed with us yet, but it's only a matter of time. We got to get to his neck of the woods. I think he's down south somewhere.
It's funny you mentioned Lindsay Sterling, because she does the violin and rhyme, and it sounds fantastic with that piano score.
Well, do you know her Zelda thing? That's kind of like her first thing that like kind of launched her into into the universe. I mean, obviously she was on America's Got Talent, but then when she did that Zelda video and dressed up as Link and did that epic violin thing, that was really like her first big thing that a lot of people knew her about. Well, we did that. The only time she's ever performed that live with a full orchestra is at Video Games Live. So we did that whole thing, and it was so cool because we played the video on the screen, her video, plus we had the other screens showing camera angles of her playing, and she's dressed up in the costume. And then we had 100-piece orchestra and choir on stage performing it live. It's on YouTube. If you go on YouTube, put in Video Games Live Lindsay Sterling, and you'll see. We did it at E3, and there were 7,000 people in the audience. It was epic.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to been at that E3 just to see that, because I think, just like everybody else, I think I probably would have been crying, and I probably just would have I don't know, gave a standing ovation for a good 45 minutes. Just don't even go to the next piece yet.
Right.
So I would say out of curiosity, tell us a little bit about starting video games live, because as I remember, I believe there was some pushback in trying to get that off the ground to growing it to what it is now, which is fairly massive.
Yeah, well, when I first started the show back in 2002, everyone thought I was insane. They thought I was crazy. I mean, no one had ever done a video game tour before. No one. Now they had done symphonic shows in the past. They had gone back to 85 and 86. They were doing Dragon Quest stuff in Japan, and they had done a couple of orchestral concerts in Japan as one-offs.
Yeah.
But none of them used video screens. None of them used lighting. None of them used it was just strictly very highbrow. Hey, let's take video game music and turn it into classical stuff, which is very cool. But that's the only thing that existed. And my whole thing was I didn't want to take video game music and turn it into classical music. My thing is I wanted to make epic music. You take a piece like Skyrim or Halo or Kingdom Hearts and Metal Gear. I wanted to start there, what people know, and then I wanted to pile on top of that shit. And I wanted to add in massive video screens, all synchronized, lasers, special effects, rock and roll lighting, interactive elements with the crowd, stage show production, everything. I wanted to create, again, video games live, because video games isn't just about the music. I wanted, there's a lot of elements that make a great video game. There's the visuals, there's the characters, there's the storylines, there's the interactivity. I wanted to bring all of that to a live show, and I wanted to bring the community, right? I wanted to, I really wanted people, and Larry, you tell me if you felt this or not when you saw the show in Grand Rapids, but one of the things, the messages of the night is, hey, everyone, we're all in this together, and this is a complete celebration of the entire video game. And don't let anyone, tell you oh, you're a hardcore gamer. Oh, you're a loser. Oh, you're going to be violent because you play video games and get a girlfriend and blah, 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 and stop eating Cheetos and Mountain Dew, right? And so, my big thing was, that's such bullshit, right? Yeah, and maybe that was gaming at a certain point by some people, but the reality is that video games are mainstream, and it's funny because I'll do interviews and people who aren't gamers, they'll ask me, they're like, I just don't get it. How come you can sell out shows all over the world? And people don't even know video game music. I've never heard it on the radio. I've never seen it on VH1 or MTV. I don't get this right now. Explain it to me. And I simply say this. I said, look, here's the deal. Video game music in this day and age, video game music is underground. I'll admit that. It's not mainstream. It's not Katy Perry. It's not Pink, right? It's not U2. It's underground. But here's the deal. Everyone under 30 is underground. So,
yeah,
well, I think too something that contributes to that is a track to a video game soundtrack isn't meant to be consumed in just a 3-minute digestion. It's something that's intended to span 20-30 minutes of a stage of an epic set piece of a game. So it's not something that has that compatible format with what you get on the radio.
And we do that. I mean, that's part of what Video Games Live does, is that my job is to take Halo and put it into a 5-minute segment that I can perform live and then put on an album or in a PBS special or whatever. So that's my big challenge always, is how do I perform Phoenix Wright and touch on all the different emotional elements. And for a game like Phoenix Wright, it's a lot of humor, right?
Yes.
Or Katamari Damacy, or something like a Red Dead Redemption, or an Eco is a perfect example, or Shadow of the Colossus, where there's epic moments and there's sad moments and there's emotional moments and there's scary moments. and I want to put that all, and now I have 60 minutes of a score that I have to figure out how to add all those elements into 4 minutes. How do I do that for a live show? And that's sometimes the challenge. But for me, it's the fun part of the arrange the orchestrations. But yeah.
Well, the thing with video game music is that the soundtracks to them were never sold at stores, and that's been one of my biggest things. Is that like Video Game Live, like that's the only soundtrack that I know here in America that I think it was like at Target or something. Like you go to Target and buy it.
It was all over. It was all over the place. When
okay.
Our first album came out, yeah, when Video Games Live Level 1 came out, it was the first greatest hits compilation video game soundtrack to ever be distributed worldwide. Even in Japan, it was distributed in Japan in every store too.
Yeah.
So that was a big accomplishment. In fact, my very first album ever, Tommy Tallarico's Greatest Hits Volume 1, it was released in 1994. That was the very first video game album to ever be released worldwide, and it was on CD and cassettes. We still had cassettes back then.
Oh yeah, that is true.
So my goal was always to push the limits to Now here's something though, Edward, that you're gonna love. You're gonna love, or should I call you Eddie V? What do you prefer, Eddie V?
Eddie. You can say Eddie V or Eddie. It's all up to you, Tommy.
Cool. Well, one of my biggest guitar heroes is Eddie Van Halen, so I'll go with Eddie V.
Okay.
So because he's Eddie VH. So one of the things that you might not know is that the average video game soundtrack outsells the average film score 3-1.
Yes.
Amazing, right? Amazing to think of. Yes.
Yeah.
Because think about it, right? Take a movie. I don't know what came out this week.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean. How many people do you know are going to go out and buy the Pirates of the Caribbean's soundtrack, right? But Zelda Breath of the Wild soundtrack, everybody's going to be all over that shit, right? So.
Yes.
So, when you think about it, now, that being said, there are certain film scores, again, Star Wars, Titanic, certain film scores out there, My Bodyguard, that have done tens of millions of albums. So I'm talking about like your average movie score as opposed to your average game score, because they'll put out a film score to every single movie that hit the market this week.
Yes.
Whether it's a romantic comedy, and they'll only sell like 2,000 units, right? But you put out if a video game puts out a score, more than likely it's a great score and it's a great video game. We don't just put out, average sounding video game scores. We put out good shit. And so when it comes out, it's going to outperform. You take a game like any of the World of Warcraft games, anything by Blizzard, Overwatch, Hearthstone, StarCraft, any of those epic games, Warcraft. Whenever they come out with a soundtrack, it goes right to the top of the iTunes and Amazon charts.
Yeah.
Every time, beating out every film score that's out that week or month or whatever. I
think that's why now when you do pre-orders and stuff, they'd be like a special edition. They include the soundtrack to that game. Even though you haven't heard the game music, they'll include the soundtrack. And sometimes I feel like, well, why not just sell the soundtrack physically? Because, like me personally, A lot of them do. A lot of them do now. And you take a game like Journey, for example. Yes.
Not only does it get a CD release and an MP3 release and all that, and then it gets nominated for a Grammy, but also now they do the vinyl too. So that's what I'm doing now. This year, you're going to see a lot of Video Games Live vinyl coming out. In fact, the first one I'm doing, I'll announce it here right on your show. World exclusive right here. World exclusive is coming out with a vinyl in a few months. It's going to be a double vinyl for Earthworm Jim. And
nice.
Yes.
And we've gone back and we've remixed and remastered, and I've added a bunch of stuff. Again, it was a double album because it's the music from Earthworm Jim 1 and 2. But we added a bunch of live stuff, and we added some fan remixes as well. So not only is there, stuff that I've written and re-recorded and stuff, but also over the years, stuff up from like ocremix.org or stuff that fans have done, and it is better than the stuff I ever did. I mean, I got to tell you, it's a huge honor when people remix, and I can tell you, because video game composers, we talk about this all the time. We love the whole remix scene. It's an honor. It's a huge honor for somebody who said, yeah, I grew up playing Earthworm Jim and I remixed New Junk City or whatever. And what an honor. I mean, it makes me feel old as shit, but what an honor that your music has had an effect, so much so that I've now inspired the music that we create inspires people to create their own art and their own music. That's the ultimate compliment.
Well, can I ask you, because now in our modern times, like we got third party, we got indie games, we got first party. A lot of stuff lately, of course, it has been orchestra related. A lot of stuff lately has become like piano driven, like a piano acoustic. How do you feel about that, like of now, or what are your thoughts?
I mean, it depends on the game. I mean, it depends. Like again, you take a game like Journey, and it's live orchestra, but it's not like 90-piece live orchestra. Mm-hmm. It was like kind of a lot of strings and woodwinds. There wasn't even any brass in the original Journey stuff, right? So and it's a delicate type of soundtrack that's emotional and stirring. Austin Wintory, the composer, is a genius, right? And so for that soundtrack, you don't need a big a pile of stuff. Talking about Zelda Breath of the Wild, like even that stuff, it's a big open world stuff. And so, having this kind of light piano stuff is cool in a lot of places. Now, that being said, I was very disappointed with the music in Breath of the Wild, only because the light stuff was great. Don't get me wrong, but I thought some of the battle music fell really short for me. Like it sounded like a Casio keyboard, like the production value quality. Like I want big live orchestral music for some of those battle themes, or something like, and it could be like light stuff, like when you were like, when you like use your shield and you had the sand seal and you're like going through the desert, or when you use your, when you were like, hand gliding all over the place. Like it would have been so cool to have like a hand gliding, like just a little like light wind music. Or where's the ocarina? That would have been a nice time to get a little like distant ocarina thing as you're kind of like gliding through this beautiful world. So anyway, but that's so sometimes games, piano's all you need, and a lot of times where composers, I think, fail is that they get too caught up in the production, and they're too focused on the production of recording a live orchestra and recording this and recording that. Then you got to mix it. Then you got to go to mastering. Then you have to do the stem so that it becomes interactive. And sometimes you get so caught up, and I know because this happened to me too. Sometimes you get so caught up in the budget and the spending and the arrangement of it all and the mixing and the mastering that sometimes you lose the most important thing, which is, again, the melody. So when you hear Zelda's theme played a little bit on the piano, it's like, every time it comes on, you get tears in your eyes. You're like, oh my God, this is so amazing, So sometimes that's all you need, all about the melody. But people ask me too, they say, well, what era of video game music do you like better? Do you like the old school original chip shit? Or do you like the new music? And a lot of people, their first reaction is, I like the old stuff. Here's the thing, and this is my most honest answer I can give. The reality is I love both.
Yeah,
I don't think I don't think the old music is better than the new music, and here as an era, and here's why. Because we're talking about Metroid and Castlevania and Mega Man and Sonic and Mario and Zelda and Tetris and all these great tunes that we remember when we were younger, and we say, oh, that music was so much better because the melodies were so much better. What you're forgetting, all of the shitty music from that era, and by the way, it was about 90%, right? So you're not remembering all the old shit. So you can say now, boy, mostly the music of this era is not memorable. It's like, yeah, but wait a second. Kingdom Hearts, Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy, Halo, Skyrim, Shadow of the Colossus, I can reel Warcraft, God of War, Uncharted, Mass Effect. Look, I can name a whole bunch of new modern music that is just as melodic, as memorable as the old shit, but you just don't remember the bad crap from the old era. So to me, it's just they're equally as awesome.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I love both. The game The Last Guardian, I know a lot of people had problems with it, but I
did not like that game.
But can I tell you? I love it. I thought it was worth the $60 that I paid for it.
You love the game. That's cool. Yeah.
There's a lot of things and stuff. The soundtrack is beautiful to me. Like, I had to put Oh, go ahead, Tommy.
I was going to say, I'll tell you a quick story. So the guy who created, of course, Ico was his first game.
Yes.
Shadow of the Colossus. Then we waited 7 years for Last Guardian. We finally got it. So for me, Ico was perfect. And then when Shadow of the Colossus came out, I thought that was even better. And so my issue with Last Guardian was that the camera angles I thought were fucking ass. And I would have liked to have seen the progression of the gameplay. What I loved about Ico and Shadow of the Colossus was that the controls and the gameplay were simple throughout the whole game. It's like you had one button. You knew you wanted to climb on the barrel, or you knew you wanted to pick up the barrel, or you knew you wanted to climb on the beast or whatever. So it was a lot forgiving, and it was simple. But when I started getting into Last Guardian, I'm like, the camera angles are killing me, first of all. But second of all, I'm 7-8 hours into the game, and it started to get... And then the more shit you could control, it was like, okay, now you got to hit the right shoulder, down arrow, and then hit the X button to do this fucking thing. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, should I be writing this down? Because I'm never going to fucking remember this. Because with me, the way I game, look, in the old days, I'd sit up and play a game 40 hours straight and finish it. Yeah, great. But now that I'm an adult, I got all the shit going on, it's like, I might play the game and then maybe 3 or 4 days later, I get to it again. And I'm like, and now I'm like, oh shit, what the fuck did I learn that last 4 days ago now? What the hell was that move? And now it becomes frustrating for me. I just wanted to do more stuff quicker, and I wanted the controls to be easier, and I wanted the gameplay to move along to... Now, that being said, I love the mechanic. I love the storyline. I love the music, all the things you were saying. So that game stuff perfect, but boy, did it fuck up the camera angle.
Yeah, a lot of people had that problem.
To me, everybody's different. I would never, I would never tell people what they should or shouldn't like. Everybody's a little different. I'm just telling you what I think personally, and people might respectfully disagree with me. Cool, because I get it. Everybody, look, it's like trying to convince somebody, hey, country music's the best shit in the world. Now, some people will agree, and other people will think you're fucking crazy, right? Heavy metal music. Some people might love heavy metal. Some people might love rap music, and others people hate it. So who am I to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't like? But so I'm just giving you my opinions as I see it, and some people might agree and some people might disagree, but that's cool. That's what makes the world great.
I think the camera angles, I agree with you with the camera angles.
There are some fanboys. It's these fanboys. It's a hardcore fanboys that piss me off. That's what I'm telling you. Everything's great because it's on the Xbox. Fucking of Nintendo.
Oh God,
Tommy, I 100%, I 500% agree with you.
Console wars die.
Yeah.
Well, can I
Say it again, Eddie.
can I ask, what do you think of rhythm-based music games like DDR, Elite Beat Agents, those kind of games that use music, or like Luminous that use music as its gameplay? Because a lot of Res for PSVR, it was meant for
I love
that.
it. I mean, Parappa the Rapper. Yeah, I mean, Parappa the Rapper was really the first game that I thought really made it amazing and cool and used interactive music the right way. I'm a huge fan. Of course, I was. If you look on the original Guitar Hero 1 and 2, I'm in the credits. I helped those guys get some of the music that was in that game, especially in Guitar Hero 2. I brought Aerosmith into a Guitar Hero, and then if you'll notice, the very first band that ever had their own Guitar Hero game was Guitar Hero Aerosmith. That was the first one. Then we did Metallica and Green Day and Van Halen, and we did other ones after that. But the reason Aerosmith was the first game, now you'll know, is Steven Tyler. His real name is Steven Tallarico. He's my cousin. So when I saw Guitar Hero.
Shit.
Yeah. So when I saw Guitar Hero for the first time, I immediately, the guys at Red Octane, which were the original developers of the game before Activision bought them, I said, dude, I got to get this in front of Joe Perry and Steven Tyler and all my guitar friends, Eddie Van Halen and Steve Vai. And so they sent me a whole bunch of them, and I mailed them to all my friends. For Aerosmith, it was actually, I'll tell you a funny story. For Aerosmith, I'm sitting in a room. It's me, Joe Perry, Steven Tyler, and oh God, what's his name? Because he was opening for him. Hold on, I got to. Lenny Kravitz.
What?
And so it was me. Yeah, it's me, Lenny Kravitz, Joe Perry, and Steven Tyler, and I'm showing these guys Guitar Hero for the first time. This is like Guitar Hero 1 before the shit even came out. And they were all watching this, looking at it, going, holy crap, like Lenny Kravitz was freaking the fuck out. And I just remember, Steven's like, you got to get us in this game. You got to get us in this game. I'm like, I know. We'll hook it up. And so, but that day.
My mouth is agape. I'm like literally blown. Wow. Oh wow. Well, did you ever get to check out the Symphony of the Goddess, The Legend of Zelda? Have you ever checked that? Or got a chance to check it out?
Yeah. I'm not. I love the music, but the person who puts on that show isn't a very. How do I say this politically?
You don't have to be PC here, trust me.
Yeah,
it's free reign to be a dick if need be.
Yeah, well, all you have to do is Google his name, and he's been. Let's put it this way: he got sued and lost almost $1 million because he fired his conductor because she was pregnant. So I mean, this is the kind of, and you can Google that; it's on there. So I mean, I don't want to get into video game symphony concert wars with you guys, but I will say I love the music to Zelda. I think the show itself is great. I don't like the person who runs it, and I think he's a piece of shit.
Okay.
That's fair.
Right.
No, I mean, as long as that's something that somebody can separate too, because having worked on Advent, Orson Scott Card has come up. Oh God, it was maybe 8 years ago or so. Shadow Complex came out when his name got a little more publicity as being attached to that. That there was a lot of ruckus about people not wanting to buy it because his name was attached to it because of some of his personal beliefs and stances. Yeah.
The Mormon thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, not just that, but a lot of the the anti-gay marriage and everything
Sure.
else that goes along with it too. And like I said, for me, I grew up reading his books, Ender's Game and Memory of Earth and a lot of others. And I think he does an excellent job of at least keeping that side of his opinions out of his writing, out of his work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard for me to praise the show when I know that the guy who's making the money off it is such a loser, So and by the way, it's not just me. He's burned every bridge he's ever come in contact with, literally. I mean, he just leaves a wake of destruction when he deals with people. He's just a bad person. He's just an awful human being. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. But like I said, the show is great. There's a Pokemon show out there done by some friends of mine who, by the way, you also used to work for that guy who shall remain nameless, and they hate him and sued him as well or whatever. But yeah, those were the guys who actually really created the Zelda show. They were the ones who did it, and then they left and they did Pokemon. But and then there's a Distant Worlds show, the music to Final Fantasy.
I want to see that so bad.
That's a great show. Now the thing that what I'll say though is that Pokemon, Zelda, and Distant Worlds, the Final Fantasy stuff, those are very different shows from what Video Games Live is. And again, I'm not saying one's better or one's worse. What I'm saying is that their approach, those three shows take a very, very different approach to Video Games Live. In those shows, everybody's in tuxedos and they tell everyone, okay, everybody be quiet. The music's beginning. Shh, everyone be quiet. And so, and there's no light, the lighting is like just, the lights are turned on and that's it. And so it's a very more traditional or classical approach to video game music. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, I think it's great. I think it helps to elevate video game music to put it in the realm of like the classical music and the Beethovens and the Stravinskys and the Mozarts. That's cool. But that's definitely not what Video Games Live is. I never want to be thought of as that. I don't want to be known as that. I want to bring the fun. And that's so for the folks who've been to both shows, there's a reason why Video Games Live is the #1 video game show, the first video game tour ever, the most popular, the biggest. There's a reason for that, and it's because when I created the show, I wanted it to appeal to everyone, not just hardcore game fans, right? And I think when you go see a Zelda show or a Pokemon show or a Final Fantasy show, you're a hardcore fan of Final Fantasy, right? Mm-hmm. And that's fair to say. But when you go to Video Games Live, and again, you probably, Larry, you saw it, you probably looked around the audience. It wasn't just gamers. It was families. It was old people. It was, and again, that was always my mission is I wanted to create a show for everyone, not just hardcore gamers. The other slight issue that I have with all the other shows too is their pricing. Is that, you're talking $80+ $100, all that stuff. They charge for a meet and greet after the show. To me, it's not about the money. Look, I made a lot of money in the video game world, over the last 30 years. I don't do Video Games Live for the money. I do it to spread the love, and it's what I'm passionate about. And I love performing. I love going world, taking the show with me. So you look at a Video Games Live tickets, and even though our show production is 10 times bigger, the millions of dollars of lighting gear, the lasers, the special effects, the synchronized video, the interactive elements with the crowd, the meet and greet, the free meet and greets after the show, all that stuff. Even though our production is 10 times more and we're more expensive a show to put on, you'll see our ticket prices starting at $20, $30. Good. The most expensive price is like, maybe $55, $60. So our most expensive price is where the other shows start.
Yeah.
And again, I just, Yeah, I could charge more for my show if I wanted to, but you know what? My mindset is I want a family of 4 to come out and enjoy the show, and they shouldn't have to spend $300-400 to do that. So
that's exactly who I had sitting next to us at the show when we came and saw you in Grand Rapids in January. Was wife and a husband and their 2 kids, and I was talking to the wife, and she's like, yeah, my husband's the one that loves playing games in the house. I'm a music teacher, and it's like this was the perfect thing to bring that together for everybody to be able to enjoy.
And when that woman left our show, I guarantee that she had such more respect, not only for video game music, but for the whole video game industry.
Yeah.
And that is the important part of what I do. So and that was always my goal from the beginning. And so that's, again, and it's probably trying to shit on the other shows. I'm not. I'm just being honest and saying this is what differentiates each of the shows. You asked me about, have I seen the Zelda show? Have I seen the Yeah, I've seen all of them. And the thing that differentiates us the most is, as you know, Larry, one of the first things I say when I come out on stage is, by the way, everybody, if there's something you hear or something that you see on screen, I want you to feel free to cheer, yell, holler, clap, whenever you feel like. It doesn't matter. I want to feel the energy. And by the way, so do the musicians. At what point did all of a sudden symphonic music, okay, everybody's got to be quiet? Are you crazy? Beethoven, in his diaries, he wrote that his most favorite part when he was conducting was that when he had his hearing was when he was conducting and the people were so emotional they couldn't contain themselves anymore, and they cheered, they hollered out during a performance. That was like his greatest thing. So, when did classical music have to become like boring and everybody's got to be quiet? Like my goal is I want to have young people to symphonic music. That's the other goal I have. And I don't want to make it boring. I don't want to, I want to, what I did is all of the things that I grew up loving. My generation, we grew up in the 70s and 80s. I'm 49 years old, and we grew up on MTV and rock and roll, like Led Zeppelin and Van Halen and rock and roll lighting, Pink Floyd. We grew up with video screens and interactive shit and like computers and video games and all this fun stuff. I took all that stuff we grew up on, and I wanted to combine that with the power and emotion of a symphony orchestra and choir. And so I wanted to combine these two worlds, this traditional world and this cutting-edge futuristic world, and I wanted to blow them up together, mash them together to create this hybrid show that no one has ever seen or experienced before. And so when I first did Video Games Live, like I was explaining earlier, everybody thought I was insane, crazy, including all the video game publishers, the symphonies, the agents, the concert promoters, the venues. Everyone thought I was insane. And when I did that first show at the Hollywood Bowl, I wanted to, people are like, oh, you should do it like small and then like work your way up. I said, no, fuck that. I want the very first show to be at the most famous venue in the world with arguably one of the greatest symphonies in the world. God, you're risking like $1 million. You're going to like lose everything you've ever worked for because, 500 people are going to show up to this thing. Because you know why? Because people who go to a symphony normally, they don't play video games. And people who play video games, guess what? They don't go to the fucking symphony. So no one's going to show up to your stupid thing. And I'm like, you know what? I disagree, and I know that people love this stuff as much as I do. And I put on that first show. I risked everything I'd ever worked for of my entire career. Make a long story short, 500 people didn't show up to that show. 11,000 did. And all of a sudden, I wasn't so crazy. And now we're, you spoke earlier about, having a Guinness World Record for being the person who's worked on the most video games. But my favorite Guinness World Records are ones that I achieved through Video Games Live, which is the two big ones are the show that we're the symphony show. No one has done more symphony shows. No tour has ever done more symphony performances than Video Games Live. Over 410 performances. That is a Guinness World Record, which is amazing. The other record which is even more crazy and significant, is that no other symphony show ever in the history of music has ever performed live to more people than Video Games Live for one performance. We had 752,000 people watching us simultaneously live in Beijing, China, back in 2015. And that is a Guinness World Record as well. Imagine this. And that includes Beethoven and includes imagine that, right? That so many people were watching this, viewing this live. It's incredible to think about. So that's the power of video game music. It's the power of the video game industry, and it's the power of Video Games Live and what we've achieved and created over the last 15 years.
And it's definitely something to experience. For anybody listening that hasn't gotten to, if you ever get the opportunity, if it's anywhere even remotely near you, for fuck's sake, go.
Yeah,
it really is. It is that mesh of bringing together a night at the symphony and a rock show.
I really want to go.
Can I bring a beautiful energy to the stage?
Larry, can I use that quote on the posters?
Absolutely, yes, please.
What'd you say? You gotta fucking
go? For fuck's sake, go.
Go. That's going to be our new tagline. The Houston Symphony presents Video Games Live. And then, for fuck's sake, go.
I want that. If that ever actually hits a poster, I want a signed poster of
that. Yes! I want one too.
I think we'd get in a lot of trouble, but I'm imagining it in my head anyway.
I don't know. You could probably at least throw it up, at the show itself. Some promotional material online.
Larry Giver from
World 1-1.
Larry Giver from World 1-1 says, "For fuck's sake, go!"
Yeah, nowhere near as big and prestigious as OneUp.com. Sorry, we're not there.
Oh wow!
You'll be there someday.
You just hit the Back Alley Games podcast.
No.
Well, Tommy, if you come to Chicago, I definitely want to go. I definitely got to come see you.
Well, we're coming to Chicago. The good news is we're coming. We're planning. We're going to be there next year in 2018.
Yes.
Finishing touches on. Yeah. So we'll be there. So.
Yes.
Did Tommy say he was sending Eddie tickets?
Did I say that? Yeah. No, it's funny because a lot of the people don't realize, like, we don't have anything to do with tickets, right? So like, it's the promoters and the symphonies. They basically hire us to put on a show for them, So it's like, we don't have anything to do with ticketing. But one of the things I always tell the promoters, I say, look, I'm not doing the show unless you have these ticket prices, because we want this to be for the family. So you might not be making as much money as normally as you would, but it's important for me that a family can come and see the show, because that's my mission, that's my goal. So,
trust me, once it touched down to Chicago and tickets go on sale, I have to buy them day one, because they're going to be sold out, and I'll be surprised if there's not a big sellout, because there are a lot of gamers in Chicago who.
Oh, we've played Chicago. We've played Chicago, I think 5 or 6 times. We played the Chicago Theater. We played the Rosemont out there by the Rosemont where Wizard World was playing. Yeah, we've done Chicago a bunch of times. You don't have to tell me. Chicago's one of the biggest cities in America, and we haven't been there in like 4 or 5 years. So my thing is that every time I come back to a place, we always change the set list of the show. Always. In fact, 410 Guinness World Record performances, and we've never played the same show twice. I always change the set list. And so a 2.5-hour show will consist of about 19 segments. Well, I tell you, over the 15 years, we've created over 170 different segments. So I could literally play Video Games Live 10 nights in a row, and no one would ever hear the same thing twice. And so So yeah, we got 10 years worth of material coming at Chicago.
Yes.
Different material for the next 10 years. We could play Chicago every year, and it would be a different show every time. So that's happening. And the other thing is, we encourage people to go on our Facebook page. And what I do is I create events pages for every show we do.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how I come up with the set list? I ask the people. So when we announce Chicago, I'm going to create a Chicago Facebook page. And the first events page from our main page, you're going to see a Chicago event. And you're going to go in there. And the first post you're going to see is by me saying, hey, everyone, help me create the show. You need to help me create the set list. What do you want to hear? And that's how I create the set list. I go in there, and if people want to hear Mass Effect, then I'll put in Mass Effect. If people want to hear Shadow of the Colossus or Phoenix Wright or Okami or whatever the fuck they want to hear, that's how I create the set list to the show.
And and literally for days like that, for me, when I know I'm going to a concert like that, I'll take the day off and I'll hear the original version just to get me hyped, because I know when I go hear that live version, it's going to mean so much more.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, with the immense resume that you have of stuff that you've worked on, hand down, what was your favorite game that you've worked on, just in terms of experience, finished product, any criteria? What's the one that you look back on most fondly?
The one that I'm most proud of, and that I spent the most time on, almost 3 years of my life, pouring every emotion, heart, and soul I had, was Advent Rising. That's a score that I'm the most proud of. But if you ask me what my favorite game to work on was, and some of my favorite fun times, it was Earthworm Jim. Because it was so fun, and it was like 12 people who were we were all like brothers, and we had worked on so many games together. We started out working on Mick and Max Global Gladiators on the Gym. It was a McDonald's licensed game, super fun, won a bunch of awards. After that, we worked on Cool Spot, also won a bunch of awards. After that, we worked on Disney's Aladdin on the Sega Genesis, also won a bunch of awards, Game of the Year. And that's when we all left. We were working for a company, Virgin Games, Richard Brance's company. And then we left Virgin after Aladdin because it was the #1 selling game that year. And that's when we said, you know what, we want to do something on our own. We're going to create our own thing. And that's when we came up with Earthworm Jim. Doug TeNaples, the guy who came up with the character, the storyline. David Perry was the original programmer and had programmed all those games I just mentioned. Mike Dietz, Nick Brudi on art, Steve Crow. And so we had this team of people. And then we created Earthworm Jim 1, then we created Earthworm Jim 2, then we did MDK. And so every game that we created, we were like a brotherhood. And we basically locked ourselves in a room for a year, and we tried to make each other laugh. And that was our game. That was our game design for Earthworm Jim.
Interplay doesn't get the respect that they should, and I kind of want to research Interplay and their history.
Well, hold on. Interplay deserves no respect.
Really?
There's two Interplays. Let me tell you. The first Interplay, the original Interplay, deserves a ton of respect. The guy who created that is named Brian Fargo. He's unbelievable. Google him. In fact, Brian Fargo's great-grandfather started Wells Fargo Bank. It's the Fargo in Wells Fargo, yeah. So Brian Fargo's a great friend of mine, super creative guy, unbelievable. Now, his new company is called In Exile. INXILE, In Exile Entertainment. They're based out of Newport Beach, and they do an amazing Kickstarter project. Like they've raised $8-9 million on their Kickstarter projects. So the original Interplay, awesome. What happened is when we did Earthworm Jim, that wasn't with Interplay. That was with a Hong Kong toy company called Playmates. They did all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys, Star Trek toys. They did a bunch of really cool stuff. So they were the ones who funded Earthworm Jim and Earthworm Jim 2 and helped to fund Shiny Entertainment. Then it was sold to Interplay originally, and then Interplay did Messiah, and that was like one of the first big games. But then Brian Fargo sold Interplay to a French company who was awful. The Titus. They were known for doing. Remember that really shitty Superman game on the N64?
Oh, Superman 64. Oh, that garbage.
God. Yeah. That was Titus, and the company who did that game bought Interplay, and with that bought Shiny Entertainment and the rights to Earthworm Jim.
Oh, no.
So you'll notice what happened. Here's the connection. This is going to freak you out now. We did Earthworm Jim 1, Earthworm Jim 2, the original team.
Right.
Interplay, then, the new Interplay, French-based company, now comes in and says, oh, we're going to do Earthworm Jim 3, and we're going to make them 3D, and we're going to have this Scottish company, Viz, who also did some shitty games for us on the N64. They're going to now produce the next Earthworm Jim game. And we're like, are you fucking serious? Like, what are you doing? The magic is the team. The reason Blizzard games are great is because of Blizzard. The reason Halo games are great was because of Bungie. The reason Metal Gear Solid games are great is because of Hideo Kojima. The blah, 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 on and on and on and on. Miyamoto with Zelda and Mario. Hello, right?
Yes.
And so, but they were all about the money. They didn't give a shit. So they started putting out these trashy Earthworm Jim games, and we weren't even involved with it. And then everybody left Shiny Entertainment because we could see the writing was on the wall, and these guys were idiots, and they didn't know what they were doing. And so still to this day, the original team, 25 years later, we've gone back to Interplay, the new Interplay, still owned by the same guy, who I've had to sue, and many people have had to sue because he just doesn't respect contracts or whatever, and he still owes everybody money. And we've gone back to him and said, look, we're begging you, give us the rights back to Earthworm Jim, and we'll pay you. You can make a royalty on the game. The original team wants to get back together 25 years later, and we'll do a Kickstarter. We'll do whatever. We'll make the game for free. We don't care because we know how huge it'll be.
Right.
But we want to get back together and make this game. We've offered this on a silver platter to this guy, and he won't do it. He won't do it.
So you consider doing the, the new route is just, the spiritual successor, everything in spirit, but
like the Mega Man guy
title,
right? Like the Mega Man guy.
Granted, Mighty Number 9 was god awful, but
Kenji
that same concept.
I mean, Earth, we could easily do that, and in fact, some of the guys on the team, they formed the company called Neverhood, and they did the claymation game.
We have them coming on in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Mike Dietz, those guys.
Yep.
Say hi for me, and they'll tell you in your own words that we'd love to do another Earthworm Jim game, and we had many meetings together, the original team, to say, hey, let's fucking do this. I think, if you ask me, someday that's going to happen. We just have to wait till Interplay goes out of business, and then we're sitting there ready to buy that shit in the auction. And they're trying to sell it. They're trying to sell the rights to Earthworm Jim for like, I don't know, $30 or $40 million. It's ridiculous.
Huh?
The prices they want, and that's why they haven't sold it yet. So eventually they'll go bankrupt, and we'll be there to whoever swoops in to get it. Hopefully it'll be us, but even if it's not us, we'll approach the people who own it and say, hey, look, the original team, let's do a game together, and hopefully they'll say yes. So I eventually think it'll happen, hopefully sooner than later before we all start dying.
Yeah, because
Earthworm not 50 years from now.
Because Earthworm Jim is, I played it more on the Sega Genesis than the Super Nintendo, and that's kind of one of my favorite shoot 'em up games, platforming games.
Well,
and it's the style. That's the thing, and so that's the thing. You can't take Earthworm Jim, because the personality of that game was the people who made it.
Yes.
Period. End of story. So they tried to take the character and the humor and the quirkiness, and they tried to have another team do that. And what you get is Earthworm Jim 3D, which was a total pile of stinking dog shit.
I don't even think anyone bought it.
And so in order for Earthworm Jim to exist in the future, it has to be done by the original team. Yeah. Period. End of story. So it'll be anything, it'll never be a great game unless it's done by the original team. And you say, hey, do you do the spiritual successor? Yeah, we could, but really, it's like the Beatles getting back together or Led Zeppelin getting back together and saying, but we're not going to do rock music. We're going to do gospel music now. Right. So it's like, it's cool, but it's not like, it's not what people really want to hear. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do think Pencil Test, though, hit it as close to the mark as you possibly could with Armakrog, which, was their, it was so much of what was Neverhood and Skull Monkeys, without being it in name. You just
without being Earthworm Jim. Well, I mean, even the Neverhood Skull Monkey character, or not? What was the Neverhood?
Yeah. Neverhood and Skull Monkeys were together.
Yeah. Even that character kind of looked a little bit like Earthworm Jim in claymation form,
Yeah, Clayman.
Yeah. Well, tell those guys I said yo.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, unless you just want to drop in, which, could be just as entertaining.
Hey, we can arrange that.
If you're interested, I'll give you a date and time when we're setting up. So,
sure.
Oh my goodness, this is.
I don't want to take over the interview though. It's about them, spotlights on them. But maybe I call in. I'll call in and we'll do 5 or 10 minutes. I'll tell them. We'll talk about some crazy Earthworm Jim Day stories.
Oh, little reminisce. Hell yeah!
I'm literally going to just mute myself and just eat food and just listen to all the stories because I'm just going to be like, wait, what they did. Because as a kid, I'm probably gonna flip out. I'm be like, I got the people who made Earthworm Jim on the podcast reminiscing. Like, that's crazy. But I look forward to that. Okay, yeah, that has to happen.
I tell you, it was a different kind of deal. We never had a game design document. We never had, again, the goal was to come in and make each other laugh. So I remember sitting in a meeting and somebody, Mike Dietz or somebody, Ed or some would say, Ed Schoenfield, say, hey, how about this? How about we launch a cow in the very beginning of the game, and then every level will see the cow somewhere in the level. Oh, and we're laughing. Oh my God, that would be fucking hilarious. It doesn't make any sense at all, but it's funny. Hey, what kind of music should we do for this space thing with the asteroids? And I'm like, let's do banjo music. Why? It doesn't make sense. But why? Because banjo music's fucking funny. And we'll put it in there. And who gives a shit? So there was no rules. There was no producer looking over our shoulder. It was just 12 best friends in a room, all making each other laugh. And that's what you get with Earthworm Jim.
And who would have thought that you guys would get a Sunday morning cartoon off of that property? Right? That's crazy. Big,
and a toy line and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, just to kind of wrap, because we're starting to run about the 90-minute mark. What's next for you? What are you working on now? What's on your plate, and what do you hope to do next?
Well, Video Games Live is always going to continue. As long as I'm alive, there will be a Video Games Live. So that'll always happen. So we're always creating new content, new material, new albums, new documentaries, whatever. So please go to videogameslive.com, sign up to our mailing list, follow us on Facebook. But mostly the mailing list is always the best thing. And, put in where you're located. And that way, whenever we're in the area, we're going to send you an email, and let you know, hey, we're coming to the area. But so Video Games Live is a great passion. The other thing, though, is that, I've been working on other live shows. So once I created Video Games Live, I started getting phone calls from Disney, from Paramount, from MGM, from other rock bands out there who wanted me to help them create their show. So one of the biggest trance and EDM artists, his name's BT, and so
Familiar.
I produced BT's last album called Electronic Opus, and then we created a whole tour where we combined EDM music and symphony stuff. So check out Electronic Opus. Just go on YouTube, put in Electronic Opus, you'll be blown away. So being a creative director and executive producer for other shows, now that I'm in kind of the live entertainment world, I've been creating a lot of other shows. And so that's kind of been my passion, not only video game music and Video Games Live and creating albums and content for that, but also, I'm working on like some big major motion pictures and turning them into live shows, working with big, historic rock bands and bringing orchestral elements into their live shows. And so, lots of fun stuff. So that's what the future is for me is producing live shows.
Tommy, what's your favorite instrument that you just like to create on? Like, did you like create it on just on piano or guitar? Like, when you start creating, what's your first instrument you like to grab or anything your favorite?
Absolutely piano. When I perform, I prefer guitar because it's cooler and I can do more things and I'm mobile. I can run around like an idiot. But when I compose on the synthesizer, piano, and I'm able to create all these big orchestral arrangements using just a piano. Using a synthesizer hooked up to a computer. It's harder to do that with a guitar or a flute or whatever. So piano's my main instrument, but when and it's the instrument I prefer to create on. But when I'm performing, I prefer guitar.
Have you ever? And my last question, I'm not going to ask the serial question like I normally ask Larry, so don't worry.
Oh no, You've made this obligatory now. It's got to happen.
Okay. Tommy, I usually ask this guest at the last, what's your favorite cereal to eat or your favorite breakfast item if you do breakfast? Or just like our favorite snack?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always used to get my Apple Jacks on.
Yes!
For me, Apple Jacks is like the shit, right? But I'm vegan. So I don't drink it with milk. I go with the almond milk now instead of the dairy cow's milk. So Apple Jacks with like vanilla almond milk from Blue Diamond is like my jam. And it's by the way, it's absolutely horrible for me. But so I gotta like sugar insulin like that So I gotta I treat myself like once a week. I usually do Saturday morning because it reminds me of when I was growing up. We used to get our cereal on Saturday mornings and watch fucking cartoons all day long, right?
Yes.
So I'll eat healthy all week, and on Saturday morning I splurge just to fuck it. Where's my Apple Jacks?
Have you ever put out your phone out like something very creative came to your mind? You ever put your phone out and just sang into it to remember the melody and stuff? Like, has that ever happened? Do that happen a lot to you sometime or not?
All the time. No, every time. Yeah, I mean the way I create music for video games is I'll watch the game. I'll play the game. I'll tell them to bring me as many drawings and. Because some of these games, they create all these paintings and just to get you in the mood boards, mood drawings, right? Mm-hmm. So give me all that shit. Now I play the game with no music, no sound, and then I just wait shit to pop into my head. And then when it does, I run over to the piano and try to figure out what's going on in my head. And so that's the most difficult part for me, isn't coming up with the music. It's trying to figure out what the music is in my head to get it down on paper, to get it down into a computer, to figure it out. That's sometimes the toughest part.
Okay.
So, Tony, I got to tell you, it will forever be a favorite memory for me now. I laughed so hard at the meet and greet after the show, walking up, because I'm sure I was probably the only idiot that did it, but because I still adore it, bringing up a copy of Advent Rising and just getting the look on your face going, "You're the one fucker that bought that."
You want to hear a funny story? It's a true story, sad but true. But the soundtrack album that I released
outsold it.
Ended up selling more copies than the game. Yeah.
I can't say I'm surprised. It is sad because the music, the story outshone the game itself. If it had just gotten the polish it deserved.
Exactly. And the team was about 6 to 8 months over budget and over already. So if we would 6 more months, it would have been one of the greatest. We'd be talking about it as one of the greatest games, because like you said, it had the music, it had the storyline, it had the characters, it had the script, the cinematics were great, and by the way, the gameplay wasn't bad. It was just some of the mechanics, but you know, but that being said, I also think it got unfairly panned by the reviews. The reviews weren't as bad as I think the game was. You know, I was seeing reviews of like 4 out of 10. It's like, come on, it's not a 4. I think I gave it around a 7.5 or an 8. And again, I think with more polish, it could have been a 9.5 or a 10. But that's with every game. You know, I once asked Shigeru Miyamoto. I worked on Metroid Prime, right? And I've known I've known Shigeru Miyamoto for 25 years. And when I asked Shigeru, I said, you got to tell me, when you work on Mario or Zelda, how do you know when it's done? How do you finally, games are all about budgets and timelines, right? So it's all about money. How many units we sell? Okay, then you start to work backwards. How many units we think we're going to sell? Okay, how much profit do we want to make? What's the budget for the game going to be? Oh, the budget's going to be $8 million. Okay, now how long is it going to take? How many people are we going to have working on it? Do we hire 30 artists or do we hire 20? That's what video games, the business of video games is all about. So I say to Miyamoto, how do you back out of like figuring out when Mario's finished, right? He goes, this is what I do. Says, I put together a timeline of how I think it's going to. Then when I figure that out, I then add 6 months. So once the game is finished, I then have my team. Everyone thinks it's done. It's like, is this game done? Everyone's like, yes, the game's done. Great. Now we're going to spend the next 6 months finessing it and refining it to absolute amazing perfection. And think about that. When you play a Miyamoto game, when you play Mario, that jump is just the right amount of pixels, and that everything about it is so polished. And you take all your best games, by the way, Halo, any game by Blizzard, right? Mm-hmm. They have that same mindset. So you might get pissed off. Oh man, Halo 3 is 6 months late. I don't care. Look, just make the game perfect. I would rather wait another year or 2 years for the game to be perfect. Look, when I worked on Metroid Prime, I worked on that motherfucker 5 years, right? And by the way, 3 more years after I was off the project, the game was still going on, the game was still being made. So, but when you get that final product, you don't care if it's a year late. You just want it to be awesome.
Metroid Prime is perfect in everything. Like I played the demo. I know we're gonna go, Larry. This is my last thing. I played Metroid Prime. Right. I played Metroid Prime the demo. And when I got done playing just the demo, I already pre-ordered that game. Paid it all off. And I'm like, day one, when it comes out, I don't care where I'm at, I have to have this game. And it's still in my top 10 of greatest games of all time. Like, from music to atmosphere, just And now I'm finding that you played on it. I'm like, I'm so mind blown right now.
I didn't do any music. The original Metroid composer did the music, but I did a lot of the sound design in the game.
Still
all
good.
The weapon sounds, visor sounds, environmental sounds, that kind of stuff. Cinematics.
I would say I knew that you had some involvement with it, and if I remember right, I don't think your name ever ended up in the credits because you were not there the whole way through that project, as I recall.
Yeah, exactly. Reading. Yeah, exactly. So, me and Miyamoto were always talking about working together. So he pulled me aside one E3 at a Nintendo party, and he says, "Look, I got a project I'm working on. It's top secret. You cannot tell anyone, but, do you want to work on Metroid?" I'm like, yes, and so it had taken about like 6 or 7 years to make that game. So I was involved from the beginning before anyone else was on it. I was doing it over at Retro Studios. They were based in Texas and Austin, I believe, or Dallas, I forget. But they were Austin. And so I was working there. I knew the president of that company really well. We were good friends. Worked on it. And then it took so long to do. Like I went through, 7 producers. And so even after I was off it, because they had started closing down parts of their other games, and so they had an internal division that started to work on it as well. And so my contract was up. Because they kept extending my contract. Then it was like, well, we have in-house people. There's no reason to like pay a guy on the outside to do this, which I totally understand. I get it. And so, it's business. And then like 2 or 3 years later, the game's done, and it had other producers as well. And so by the time they came to making the credits for the game, the guy who was the producer didn't even know that I worked on the thing.
Oh.
So my name got left out. And then when they did Metroid Prime 2, they used all of my sounds. And I said, look, and so they said, well, where are these sounds? Where are all these sounds for the game? We can't find them on any of our hard drives, the original sounds. Where are they? And then they did a little digging, and then the producer of the new Metroid Prime 2, he contacts me. And I actually have the letter and the email that he wrote. I put it up on my website. And he contacts me. He goes, "Holy crap! There's this directory that we found, and it's all the Super Nintendo or the sounds from the not the GameCube, what the fuck it was GameCube.
Yeah,
right?
It was GameCube.
GameCube. Yeah, I was thinking N64. No, GameCube. He says we found this directory, and it said Tommy Tallarico, and it was all the sounds of the game. But they were in the Nintendo format. We need them in the real shit. So, what did you have to do with the game? And I told them, holy shit, okay, this makes sense now. So anyway, so I think my name's in too, but I didn't do any new sounds for it. But I told them, I said, hey, look, can I get a credit? Because it kind of I'm not a credit guy. It doesn't bother me. But what bothered me is that when I would say that I worked on Metroid Prime, and people were like, no, you didn't.
There wasn't anything to point to.
Your name's not in the credits. So I'm like, okay, that's fucking lame. So yeah, here's my contract. I can show you my hard drive and my contract with them. But
Tommy,
anyway,
just hearing you on Metroid Prime makes me happy. I really want to cry because that game is just, I love that game. So yay! Oh, this is crazy. Yes.
Yeah, and that's my go-to series. Eddie,
I'll tell you my last story, and then I got to go. But because you love Metroid Prime, I'll tell you what makes Miyamoto different from every single person out there. It's very simple: his way of thinking and his approach to game design.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll tell you the story. So, when we first started talking, Miyamoto says this to me. Now, most of the time, sound effects, especially for weapons, it's considered post-production, right? So like when Cliffy B, I'm working on Unreal 2 with Cliffy B, and he says, hey, here's a chain gun, and he shows me the animation of the chain gun, and then I will do the animation based on the image that he gives me, right? That's post-production. And that's normally same thing with the movies. You have the car screech, you have to watch the car screech, then you create the car screech sound to go along with it. Miyamoto, what he did is he comes to me and he says, look, Tommy, this is what I want you to do. I'm not going to give you any visuals. I want you to just create the most amazing weapon sounds. I want you to use your imagination. Create the sounds that you think are just the coolest shit. You didn't say shit. But then I'm going to give those sounds to our artists, and I'm going to have them create the weapons around your sounds. So I want you to use your imagination, and I'm going to let my designers use their imagination and the artists. So like when I was coming up with like some of that, like that warp gun thing where it's like,
yes,
right? That when they heard that, they're like, ooh, that sounds like the waves are like pulsing through the air. And so that's how that was created, because the sound was created first. That's what makes Miyamoto the genius that he is. He just thinks in a different way. Mm-hmm. And that's my final story for you.
Right on. So just to wrap then, our last segment that every listener hates, but we do because it's obligatory for all of our guests, because we want to give you the platform. Tommy, pimp your shit. Where can we find you?
Videogameslive.com. And I'm in the middle, over the next 2 months, I'm going to be completely rebranding the videogameslive.com website and my website, Tallarico.com, because I created those websites about 15, 20 years ago. When they came out 15, 20 years ago, they were cool. Now, not so much. They're lame. But anyway, so bear with me, but go to videogameslive.com, go to Tallarico.com, but also on Facebook, Tommy Tallarico, Video Games Live, look for the blue check mark. Twitter, same thing. Look for the check mark. Instagram, look for the check mark. All that shit. So, I get on Facebook Live. We have a fun time. I travel all over the world. I'm always doing shit behind the stage, backstage and behind the scenes stuff. So, yeah, follow me on Facebook and be my friend. Damn it.
Oh yeah. Real quick, because I know you mentioned it earlier. When and where can we get a hold of the new Earthworm Jim vinyl?
I don't know yet, but another great reason to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and all that, because I'll be announcing all that stuff. Same thing with the Video Games Live mailing list. Join up there. We'll make the announcements. And for all of our other albums, all of the Video Games Live albums, we've done 5 orchestral albums, 2 piano albums, 1 for Majora's Mask, 1 for Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross. We're doing a Donkey Kong Country piano album next. So all of this stuff, just put in Video Games Live. We're on Spotify. We have over 30 million listens on Spotify, so you can get us there. You can buy our stuff on videogameslive.com. You can buy our stuff on Amazon, iTunes, whatever you're listening to. We're all over that shit.
Oh, I got to have me a physical of the Chrono Trigger piano. Nice. I have to.
Check us out on Spotify. Add us to your playlist.
Absolutely. Everybody get on that. Eddie, pimp your shit, go.
You guys can find me on Twitter at @RetroCode. You can hear my podcast, Optional Opinion, at SoundCloud.com. And you can also read this week's Optional Opinion feature, where I'm talking about modern Japanese games and how they are thriving in today's society. So you guys can check that out at IGN.com under Anime, ENIME. You can hear more of World 101 Podcast at ShoutEngine.com. There we will give you the other podcast apps. And you can email the show at world101podcast@gmail.com. And follow us on Twitter at world1_1podcast that's on Twitter. Yeah. Oh, and join our Facebook page. And you can also read my latest review of Rhyme on World 101 Podcast Forum.
Right on. Eddie's covered most of it, though, but, always find us at our home on shoutengine.com. You'll also find us on iTunes, Google Play Music, the DNA Podcast Network, coming soon to NGR Radio, also up on Podknife. Follow the Twitter, like the Facebook page. We've got news, reviews, giveaways, whenever there's extra goodies floating around. Also, join the conversation, join the group, the podcast forum on Facebook as well, and that's it for us.
Yeah, and we're getting ready for E3, you guys. So be checking that out soon.
Also, make sure just a quick side note, coming up next show, we are joined by Yacht Club Games, so make sure you do not miss.
Yes.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Tommy,
Thanks
for
so
coming.
much.
And with that, everybody, we are out. Bye.